Well, hello, folks, and welcome back to Senate District 2. I'm Texas State Senator Bob Hall, and coming to you again with another in our series of videos with regards to the medical community and COVID and what is happening and changing the culture that we're seeing out there. That as we've talked about before, we've moved from where our hospitals were a benevolent place where you could go with great confidence to be safe, knowing that you were in hands that their number one priority was your health, what they could do, and with a willingness to do whatever it would take, whether it was conventional or unconventional, so long as it was good medicine that heals. And that was at the forefront of what they did. We had that for years that, by golly, if the doctor said it, you can believe it. If this is what the hospital is going to do, you know they have your best interests at heart. And they went out of their way to make sure as things change, such as understanding the need for friends and loved ones when you were in serious condition in the hospital, to be there with you. I mean, even to the point of having chairs that make into beds and rooms that were designed in some of the hospitals being built to accommodate a friend or loved one in the room with them as part of it, and recognizing that everybody's unique, that the use of medicines off-label is basic to medicine. Matter of fact, some people have told me that as much as 60% of the medications that are prescribed are being used off-label, and doctors that are really doing the right job, they treat the patient and their symptoms, because everybody reacts different to medications and to processes and procedures. And the whole thing, though, was focused on the patient's good health. And then along came COVID, and the government took over. But setting up prior to that, our hospitals had moved from being doctor-operated benevolent organizations to profit centers. And so that was all set up when the government stepped in with more Medicare and more Medicaid to start dictating what hospitals would do. And so the door was wide open when COVID hit. And when COVID came, the government stepped in and said thou shalt do this and thou shalt not do the other. And all of the hospitals stood up and saluted and say, yea, verily, you're the government. We will follow you. Now, we recognize you have no medical experience, no clinical experience, and you like the state of Texas. We didn't have a medical doctor that was involved in any decisions we made here, a clinical doctor. We had people with doctor titles, but they were not real medical doctors. And it was the same way with the government. And they came out with some ungodly direction, such as no early treatment. No one had ever heard of that policy before COVID hit. Oh, you're not sick enough yet. We're going to wait till you get just sick enough so that we can put you in the hospital and then treat you. We didn't realize when that first came about that what they were doing was setting it up for profit for the hospital, to make sure the patient went into the hospital sick enough, they were going to stay there, they were going to be able to then run them through the predetermined treatments. That is, they knew what they were going to do to the patient before the patient even got in the hospital. They were going to make sure that they were ventilated, given remdesivir, and then worked it so they would crank the pressures up to make sure that the patient didn't survive. And all the way, the longer the patient stayed, the more treatment they got, the more money the hospital made. And that was the focus of it. The well-being of the patient had absolutely nothing to do with the protocols that the hospital followed, which led, after we had a number of conversations that we had several months ago, a lot of months ago now, as a matter of fact, because this has been going on since March, April of 2020, that I think, Greta, after you were in the hospital and came out, we worked with you, and the protocols were what we're doing it, and you set up the website protocolskills.com. And we all started talking about the fact that people were not dying of the COVID, they were dying of hospital policies. It was the protocols, the policies the hospitals were handing down from the financial officer dictating the treatments for patients in order to prolong their stay and maximize the money they would make off the patients. And that's took us down the spiraling road of so many people dying, so-called, of the COVID. Well, they died. They may have had COVID, but it wasn't COVID. Was not what was killing them. What was killing them was a hospital policy. The protocol kills in there. And also along the way, about the same time, Laura, you recognize that talking with people that because you're well familiar with the medical community, your brother, Dr. Richard Bartlett, had been instrumental as one of the first people to step up with one of the treatments that was incredibly effective, budesonide. And he paid a dear price for doing that, but he is a man of real courage, and he saw how effective it was. And we knew that from them and other doctors that we were talking with, like Dr. Peter McCullough, Stella Emanuel, Simone Gold, Richard Urso, Kat Lindley, Lynn Finn. I mean, I can name the list, go on and on, who knew what could be done, and that really nobody with the COVID really needed to go to the hospital. This was not something to be treated in the hospital. This was something to be treated at home for at least 99% of the patients out there. And the other big lie they told us was it would affect everybody equally. Well, it didn't take long to figure out it was just those with an compromised immune system that were really affected. The young were fairly bulletproof. It was the elderly. And I think we had about 80% in the first year of people who died were in our nursing homes, over 65. But Laura, you recognize that there was a way to combat this, and that was to get people out of the hospital. There was no reason for them to stay in there. And as we encountered, and I think we worked several cases together, talking to the hospitals about, and the patients about, you can leave, you can go, and here's what you do, and here's how you do it. And so you started hospital hostage rescue that kind of has gone viral now, and gone it started out just in Texas, as I believe, but you're now working it nationwide to help people. So giving people an alternative. So let's let y'all tell the folks out there about protocolkills.com, what you're doing, and hospital hostage rescue.
Right. So thank you for having us on. This is such an amazing opportunity to get this information out. We appreciate everything that you're doing to support people, not just in Texas. People are inspired all over Senator Hall. People are inspired by what you're doing in Texas, in all the states. I'm hearing from people, we need a Senator Bob Hall. I'm sorry, he's ours. we put him on loan when we can. But Greta and I met because Greta was kind of telling people's stories after the fact, and having gone through the hospital system and being a victim herself, but being able to escape, she understood how important it is for people to know the things that she wished she had known when she was in there. So some of those things are that you can leave, the hospital. They'll tell you. I just heard from a doctor straight from the horse's mouth that you're not gonna be able to leave. I heard that on a call, and then when I corrected the doctor and said, well, they can leave AMA. Oh, you can leave against medical advice, of course. Didn't I just say that? Yeah. So these are the type of things that patients are hearing. They're being lied to. They're literally being coerced into certain drugs, using certain drugs, agreeing to certain protocols, agreeing to certain treatments, agreeing to stay longer than they want to stay in a hospital. They're fearful. Everybody I talk to is afraid that the hospital is going to do something to compromise them if they push back. And so I'm here today to really give you some amazing news that we have a tool, a strategy that is working. It's proven to be effective, and more recently in some documentation that we're going to bring forward. And Greta's going to tell you a little bit more about that. But I just want to tell you that the difference that we're making is largely due to having insight from a truly a courageous person that is a hospital insider. This individual is a RN and JD and is a former hospital administrator. That is the secret sauce right there. This is somebody truly from inside the system who is willing to divulge the strategies that will work. And we've employed those strategies and they do work. You need to have your wishes. One of the strategies is that you need to have your wishes written down in advance. And it's not just a power of attorney. I'm going to turn it over at this point to Greta to explain some of these things.
Thank you. Well, first I want to say that a lot of people think, oh, COVID's over with, and they also have this conception that, well, if I do get COVID, I'm just not going to the hospital. I'll stay at home. I'll take care of it. And although that may seem like the right idea, you may have to go to the hospital. You never know when you're going to have to go to the hospital. There's emergencies all the time. And we're not telling people don't ever go to the hospital. If you have a heart attack, if you have your leg cut off, you need to go get help. But what we're offering is for you to be on the offense instead of the defense. We want people to be empowered when they go into the hospital, where they know their patient rights. They have supporting documents as tools to use. And then in case of an emergency where they feel like, well, I have become a hostage all of a sudden without even knowing it, then they have a hotline to call to get help. But if you're not prepared in that aspect right now, because everybody's at risk of going, of having an accident. And we encourage everybody to be prepared today. So that way, in case something happens, you can't just say, well, I don't want remdesivir or I don't want this. That doesn't work. We've seen it. It doesn't work at all. And so we have documents that are medical directives that have been proven to be effective. And these documents are unlike any other. There's nothing out there because they marry three different components. One is the patient's rights, where they have the directives of what they consent and they don't consent to. The second part is deeply held religious beliefs and spiritual beliefs. And the third part is actually consequences for a doctor who blatantly refuses to adhere to those beliefs and rights. So on the first part, we want to talk about the patient rights and the directives. You're telling the doctor, I consent to this, I don't consent to this, but you're telling them in writing. And if you can do this before you go to the hospital, then you can get it notarized and signed and be prepared in case of an emergency. And with that, we've noticed that in the hospitals, they are actually pushing vaccines on people. Even though they tell them, no, I don't want it, I don't want it. They are pushing it because they actually get more money if they give a vaccine in a hospital. I've seen the documentation where they get a payout for each vax that they give within the hospital. And this is even one example was a 93-year-old patient that reached out to Laura. Do you want to tell her story, Laura?
Sure. The 93-year-old didn't go in, just to be clear, did not go into the hospital for COVID. And we're seeing that a lot. These are non-COVID reasons to go to the hospital. But once they're in the system, it becomes a fight just basically to survive your experience at the hospital. Yeah. Every day.
Let me just make sure people understand. What you're telling people is about what their rights are and what they can have to accept. You're not giving medical advice. You're not telling them in any way at all, any kind of medical advice. This is based on their rights that they get to choose how they're treated by the doctor, what their rights are, in spite of what the hospital or doctor might tell them. This is all about their rights.
Yes.
It is not about medical treatment. That's going to be between them and their doctor.
Right. And we've always had these rights. We've always had them. They've just been hidden from us, or we didn't take the time to learn them. So that's what we're trying to empower patients with these rights, bring it back to the forefront.
Okay. Go ahead, Laura. I just want to understand that.
Absolutely. So this 93-year-old did not have the written directives before she went into the hospital. So when she was in there, she was just verbally saying, no, I don't want this or that. That was her choice. Free will, whatever she wanted is what she should get. She said, I don't want a COVID vaccine. She was coerced 5 times. They, figuratively chased her around trying to give her a COVID vaccine that she said no to. After the fifth time, she decided she's not safe there anymore. She was going to be medically discharged by the hospital in the morning of this event I'm about to talk to you about. The night before she was going to be discharged by the hospital, so she's over whatever the reason she was in there for. Okay, she's healthy at this point. She's going to be discharged. She felt she was no longer safe to remain in the walls of that hospital. So she wanted to go home earlier. Okay. She wanted to go against medical advice and leave maybe 8 to 9 hours earlier than when they would discharge her from the hospital. So she pushes the call button, the nurse's call button, and for 20 minutes, the nurses don't come. At that point, she's thinking, I need to do something and escalate this so that somebody will come. She starts disconnecting the leads that are to machines that are connected to her body so that it'll set off an alarm. She does this and they still don't come. She's like, wow, I could have fallen out of bed, broken a hip, and nobody would come. I am definitely safer at home than I am in this place. So she calls her family, it's around midnight, and says, family, please come get me, take me home. Now, keep in mind, they were going to discharge her in the morning. She's just leaving slightly earlier. Her family comes and gets her. She gets wheeled past some staff that never asked, is everything okay? Where are you going? Can we help you? No, they just laugh and point and whisper. She gets home and I'm on the phone with her. She says, I'm safe. I'm out. While she's on the phone with me, she hears a knocking on the door. And she says, oh my gosh, Laura, the police are here. And I assured her, you have not broken the law. These are the lengths of that people have to go to just to leave. And then I see that personally, in my opinion, to be harassment after you leave on your own free will to leave a hospital, which is your right to leave, that the hospital would call the police on this person. Okay, that's just one scenario. Go ahead, Greta, and take it from here.
And that's why we want you to be prepared beforehand to have these documents in writing. So that way you understand that just saying no and refusing, it's just talking into the wind to them.
Be clear, she was afraid that if she fell asleep, they would put something in her arm. That is how sure she was. And this is a person that very clear-minded person. She was a very high intellectually functioning 93-year-old. And it wasn't just a figment of her imagination that people were going to put something in her arm. They had asked her with the needle coming towards her arm 5 times, and she said, I'm out. So go ahead.
And we know that would happen because there were several other people that we worked with over several months period that experienced the same kind of coercion within the hospital after giving it to them in writing and verbally by both the husband and the wife, and they were remdesivir. They would attempt to do it while the patient was asleep, and thank goodness the patient woke up. We don't know how many times they were able to sneak it in and do it while the patient was asleep and start them on the path to die, because hospital personnel nicknamed remdesivir. They gave it a nickname, but it was hey, run, death is near. Talked to several people that we managed to get out of the hospital. We kept saying they keep trying to do stuff while I'm asleep, or even after I've told them or put it in writing that I did not want it done. So,
right, and you're at particular risk in the hospital as opposed to anywhere else. You can get a vaccine. You could be at CVS and nobody chases you up and down the aisles saying, you sure you don't want it? You sure you don't want it? You sure you don't want it? You're not harassed like that anywhere else where it's available. It's only when you're compromised, you're sick or asleep in a hospital that this kind of coercion happens.
And I think we'll find that the financial benefit to the hospital for getting that shot and those treatments is significantly higher than what CVS or Walgreens is getting for peddling their version of the shots. And it all goes back to exactly the problem we have. There are hospitals today are run, and their decisions are made based on how much money they're going to make.
Right.
And
right. And I think
that's the driving factor.
And everybody's question at this point, watching this far into this interview, will ask, well, if you had it in writing in another instance that Senator Hall mentioned and it didn't work, why would it work in this instance? And so Greta, tell them how different our documents are. It's truly groundbreaking. What we're going to share with you, if you had this type of language in your document, it might have worked. Go ahead,
Right.
Greta.
Yeah, I'm going to continue with that. And I also want to mention that now doctors, more people are realizing how lethal and deadly remdesivir was. So now it's to the point where doctors are ready to forego that payment of remdesivir, especially if it's for a younger patient, because they don't get paid as much for that. They're willing to sacrifice that payment for remdesivir to get that total payout of the death of a patient with COVID listed on the death certificate. So it's like, well, if I don't have to fight about remdesivir, we'll just find them a different way to kill them. And they can. There's so many drugs that they can use to actually kill a patient. And there's no reason to ventilate a patient at 98% oxygen that's sitting up and eating breakfast. That's crazy, and we've heard it, we've witnessed it. But to continue on with these documents, the second part is it addresses the deeply held religious and spiritual beliefs. A classic bioethics case of this is Jehovah's Witness. If you are a Jehovah's Witness and you do not believe in accepting blood products, and you go to the hospital, the doctors have to respect those wishes, no matter if the patient is going to die or not. They just have to stand back and say, well, that is their beliefs. They choose not to get this, blood that could save their life, and the patient may possibly die. There's nothing the doctor can do, because by law, they have to respect those religious beliefs. And that's what we've included in these documents as well. And the third part of it is that these documents also explain the consequences of what a doctor will face. It says in there, if you do not adhere to my religious and spiritual beliefs, to my patient rights, I will, or my medical power of attorney will report you to the medical board. And this scares a lot of doctors. But here's the thing: if you are doing the right thing, and you do what is requested of the patient and on this document, then there's not a problem. You're only going to be reported if you blatantly deny and refuse a patient their written rights that have been
informed consent.
Yes, and
informed consent. This is only about informed consent. Patient informed consent. That is the only way that a doctor will be reported, is if they blatantly trample on a patient's rights that they've always had. And finally, there's some consequences.
And if you think about it, most doctors are staying there because they're afraid they're going to lose their job. So they're feeling like they have to do these protocols or they will lose their job. Well, now with these documentations, they have to sit back and say, wait a minute, I could lose my license. If I get a complaint, they're going to have to investigate me. It's going to be on my record forever. And if it comes out that these documents are upstanding in court, I could lose my license. I would not be able to, I wouldn't have my job at the hospital. I would have no job in the medical field. So that is something that they have to weigh. Do I keep my job in the hospital, or maybe I should just, say, no, I can't do this. I have to respect these patients' rights and push back.
What you're saying is very consistent with how the Texas Medical Board operates. They have now demonstrated over the last several years that they really don't have any interest in the health and well-being of the patient. Their only interest is in the doctor, is instilling a high level of fear in doctors that they have a very subjective way of threatening their license. And they have used the informed consent. That's the only thing they're concerned about. They really don't care whether the patient is harmed or not. They just want to make sure the doctor has done the informed consent. So to some extent, that kind of works with it, supporting what you're talking about, is making sure that that doctor does do informed consent. Because here in Texas, our medical community is just about bulletproof for lawsuits. We're saying, and in particular for COVID, of SB 6 that was passed last time, I was the only legislator actually voted against that bill, but it stripped everybody of all their rights when it comes to hospital and doctor, what may have, our businesses, anything has to do with COVID. But in the medical field, this is the one thing that you can actually use as we keep trying to find some benefit to the state of Texas for the Texas Medical Board. And about the only thing I have found so far is it would be the proper use of informed consent. Unfortunately, they have used that way out of line on a number of times with doctors because it was the only way they can go after them. And it is one thing they can keep fear in those doctors, which is what they want, so they can tower over them as they are the almighty God of medicine in Texas. And that's the one key, is that informed consent, because they've let doctors into Texas, gave them a license here where they were kicked out of other states, multiple states, for really bad things they did. But Texas didn't bother to check on that. They just gave them a license and let them come in. And there's a whole string of other things they've done. And so that is the one point. So I'm glad you're making that point there with.
Yeah.
That's
And
the
these-
only reason. It's
Right.
just informed consent. That is the only thing that this puts them on notice for.
Right.
Not whether or not they have a good personality, not
Mhm.
whether or not they may have accidentally offended somebody, not
Mhm.
because they looked at them cross-eyed, but you have violated their informed consent. You denied them of that.
Right.
That's the
And
only reason.
And this holds weight because it's in writing. And if you get it done, preferably before you go, then it's notarized. I mean, this will hold weight and it will open the eyes of doctors. And a lot of people have said, well, I had medical directives, I had power of attorney, I tried to give them to the doctor and the doctor just refused. We have specific instructions on the delivery method of these
And
documents.
And these are insider directed tips of how to get this to the right place, so it doesn't accidentally end up in the trash can or on some nurse's station desk. This will get into their electronic medical record, so that when there's a rotating fleet of doctors involved in a case, or a rotating fleet of nurses touching this particular patient's record, they all are on notice. They all see it. And go ahead and tell them how different this is.
It puts the hospital on notice in two different areas. So it will be received by the hospital. One with courier, where you're going to get a signature for that, and another with certified mail, where you're also going to get a signature from the hospital. So if my doctor was talking to me and said, no, I'm not going to take those, I would say, well, that's all right. Your hospital has already received these documents, certified mail, and it's addressed to your CEO. So I would, if I was you, I would take the documents that your CEO already has, especially since this directly concerns you and how you're going to treat me. And I bet you anything that doctor will take those documents at that point.
How about at that point, Greta, just tell that doctor, if you're not going to take these documents, I don't want you to treat me.
Exactly.
Leave my room.
Exactly. The problem is that
you can fire your doctor.
you
have
can.
Absolute right to fire him.
You
And
can.
so
You
we
can, but we've had so many situations where another one comes in worse than that one.
Right.
And then they want to start the treatment immediately. But those are the types of doctors that we don't need in the system, that they are blatantly disregarding patient rights. They won't even take the papers, those are the doctors I want them to receive those letters.
You're talking about the doctors that the Texas Medical Board ought to be going after.
Right.
Ones that
Yes.
they should be trying to do something rather than those.
We're flipping the tables.
Yes.
Okay.
We've got
It's
it,
been
we got
used
it upside down.
inappropriately nobody knows more than maybe, well, there's a lot of people who know how abusive that organization can be in levied towards good doctors doing the right thing. We're not talking about that.
No.
We're talking about using what they have. It's almost biblical. What
Mhm.
they meant for bad, we will
We're gonna
use for good.
good. Mhm.
It was meant to protect patients. Patients need to rise up and use it to protect themselves. And we have a mechanism to do that, because it won't only be signed, notarized, and sent randomly. It will go directly to the target it needs to land on, which is the CEO of the hospital. Go ahead, Greta, and explain
Yeah.
that.
And although these documents will be used by the patients, it will give doctors a hospital in the hospital, the good doctors that really are, feel up against the wall, it's going to give them a way to push back against the hospital for the very first time. So really, if I was in the hospital as a doctor doing what I'm supposed to be doing, but I feel like I'm between a rock and a hard space here, it's actually a way to say, look, I can't do this. I can't do what you're asking me to, because it violates the patient's rights and I risk losing my license. So it really should be welcomed by all. Like Laura said, this was set up to protect the patients and to protect the good doctors. It's a way to weed out the bad ones. And if we're not using it for its intended purpose, if it's being used, by the enemy, we need to take it back. We need to start using it. But we also want people to know that, like you had said earlier, Senator, that you need to know your rights. This is a tool to use. So you can't just hand over the documents and say, I'm done. You need to know your rights. And you need to know that you can fire your doctor. You need the biggest right is informed consent. You need to know when somebody goes to give you a drug or a treatment, okay, what is the name of that drug? What is its generic forms? What are the risks, the benefits, the alternatives? What are your success rates with this drug? And if they can't tell you that data, well, then get back to me. Go find it and get back to me. Because before you put something in me, I want to know the facts, And so patients need to know this, that needs to be ingrained into their head. It's something we should already know, but unfortunately, we put so much trust into the doctor that we have just handed over our health to them and not taken any accountability of ourselves, of our own bodies. And so we're going to have to start doing that. We're going to have to, take that back and be responsible for our own health to a certain extent. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about, Laura?
Yeah, I want to emphasize that these documents I know that everybody talks documents, and usually they're written by lawyers with no inside understanding of how even a hospital works. Hospitals are like split. You want to explain that, Greta? They're actually two separate entities, really. There's the medical staff services side.
Are you describing that? Let's put up a list of the documents and how people can get contact with them. What those documents are and how they can get them from you, the website or email address or whatever you have that people can, and they understand there is no charge for these documents. No. These are free. In fact, that's a big point I want to make right now, that all of what you guys are doing, you're doing because God's led you to do this. You're doing it out of the goodness of your heart, recognizing that we have a crisis, a medical crisis in our country, and someone has to make sure that people know what their rights are so that we can help them, save them from the hospital tyranny that's going on. But we'll put up that list now that they can see what these documents are, the website and an email address.
We actually have an email address that goes directly to these documents. It's called ourpatientrights.com. So that way you can go directly there, and it's nothing but the documents on there. You have documents, I am the patient, I am the surrogate, and I am the medical power of attorney. And they're all three of those are different. If you're the patient, you want those forms. But for me, if I'm the patient, I also want to have my medical power of attorney picked out. And I want to have those documents printed out too, just in case I go into the hospital and for some reason I'm unconscious and can't make a decision. It's important to have both of those documents. You want to add anything to that, Laura?
Yes, I would like to give the scenario that most people in the freedom movement, I'm going to give you some words that are thrown around in the truth movement, in the health freedom movement, in the patriot movement. I hear these words thrown around, but nobody's doing anything to really effectuate change inside the hospital walls. Nothing gets changed for the person who's laying in that bed saying, they're trying to kill me and I need some help from the outside. A lawsuit's not going to do it. They're bulletproof, as you mentioned, in Texas. It's just paperwork. You're just doing busy work. Okay. What that person needs is something real, tangible to help them get out alive. And I feel like we have that because it's working. It's actually effective. Now, if your answer in the patriot health freedom movement, whatever you want to call it, is just don't go to the hospital. That's stupid, because you tell me how you're going to advocate for yourself when you get hit by a car at 60 miles an hour head on by a drunk driver or whatever the situation may be. You can't, I'm sorry, but you're going to need a hospital. We need surgeons. There's a place for them. There's a reason it's called emergency room. It's for emergency situations that you didn't plan. You need to be protected before you walk across the threshold of that hospital.
And what you're doing here with these documents and knowing what your rights are, for the good doctors who want to do the right thing, the good doctors who actually put the patient's welfare above their fees, you're helping them with an excuse that they can use to say, hey, this is, I've got to follow this. And indirectly, what you're doing is helping them be able to actually put the patient's welfare above the hospital's profits. And
yes, we've actually, yes, this is happening. This is already happening. Walking in and saying, I can't do this. Walking into administration, a doctor who wants to do the right thing now has an excuse, walks in, waves these papers and says, it says right here, my license is at risk. I can't do it. It's in writing. I will, if they said they didn't want XYZ drug, whether that's remdesivir or if it's an antibiotic like vancomycin, or I don't want a COVID vaccine or a flu vaccine, they initialed that spot. It says right here on the top that I will be reported to the medical board, and I'll have a complaint on my record forever. I'm not doing it. They finally have a pushback, a mechanism to not only protect it gives them an out. We're giving them an out, right, that they never had before, these documents.
And as long as they're doing the right thing and doing what the patient wishes are and the patient's requests, then they have nothing to fear. More thing on your medical power of attorney, and Laura's experienced this many times. You want to make sure that you have someone that is not just your friend, not just somebody, well, I like that person, I'm I'm really close to my mom or whatever. That's not how you pick your medical power of attorney. You pick them based on their knowledge and their willingness to stand up and fight for you, because a lot of the times these doctors that are trying to do the wrong thing are trying to coerce patients to doing things that is not good for them at all. That leads to their death. And if you know your rights, then you want your medical power of attorney to know those rights as well. And you want them to be familiar with everything that we're talking about on here. And you want them to have the courage to stand up. Some of them have told us, well, the doctors are in charge. I don't want to make the doctors mad. I don't want to bother the doctor too much. They're working for you. You're there. They get paid to take care of the patient, and you as a patient have the right to know what's going on. And if you're a medical power of attorney, you're stepping in the shoes of that patient. So you have the right to know what's going on and to ask questions. And you have the right to stand up to this doctor and say, no, this is not right. You're not going to do this. So I just want to make that clear as well.
I can't emphasize how important it is that every American, I care about Americans. That's why I'm doing this 24/7. This isn't a 9-to-5 job. It's not a paying job. It's not a nonprofit. It's a no profit. Let me delineate the difference. There's no benefit. There's no salaries that get paid in a nonprofit. There's no salaries. It's zero profit. Zero. Why? Because I care about people, and Greta cares about people. It's what God thinks. This is how we feel like God has directed us to spend our time, is to give this inside baseball, if you will, about hospitals and how they work and how you can stay safe. I would encourage other platforms other than just Senator Bob Hall, who's a amazingly brave, patriotic American who has a platform and influence. If you're a pastor, point them to ourpatientrights.com. If you are a media platform like Tucker Carlson, talk about this. People are still going to the hospital. 500 to 1,000 a day could possibly be subjected to harassment and coercion and possibly die in a hospital because they didn't know this information. Tucker Carlson, Fox News, CBS, NBC, CNN, Dan Bongino's platform, Diamond and Silk, all of them need to be talking about ourpatientrights.com.
Absolutely. And I want to thank y'all for coming on. Is there anything, last thing you want to say? I think you've
Yes.
given people really good understanding here.
On the ground, and to tell people about our patient rights and get them the documents that could possibly save them before they go in. But also we could use people to step up and say, I want to help you by taking their own personal time to be a volunteer courier or a notary. If you can get the certificate or whatever it takes to be a notary, so that somebody in a hospital who needs something notarized could call you wherever you're at in America. If they're, say, laying in bed in Columbus, Ohio, and they need a notary, and it's all confusing to people. Okay, this is all new. This is a new paradigm. We need notaries and we need couriers. If you can do any, or just an errand runner, if you can be somebody that can make copies of documents and run them up to a hospital so that they don't have to leave the bedside of their loved one, please help us by helping somebody else. You can contact us, and we will create a we'll create a way to get people connected to you.
Yes.
Okay. And how can they contact you to say, I'm a volunteer, tell me what I can do to help?
You can go to protocolkills.com. You get the documents directly from our patientrights.com. And if you want to know more about the rights, we've also set up another link at hospitalhostagehelp.com. So there's 3 ways. All of it is found on protocolkills.com if it's confusing. But if you want to go directly to any of them, you can go to through those direct URLs.
Okay, that was hospital hostage
help.
Okay. All right. Well, I can't thank you guys enough for what you're doing. I can't thank you enough for coming on to get this information out to folks so we can start saving people from the clutches of the hospitals who now focus far more on the profit they're going to make than the treatment the patient gets. And hopefully when this gets out to enough people out there and they start using it, we can change the atmosphere of the hospital and move it back to where it used to be, where you could go to a hospital with confidence that your health is what they were there to take care of, not their pocketbook. And so I thank you enough. We have up on the screen now how you can contact them, patientrights.com, protocolkills.com. And I think on there you also have a lot of stories about people's experience with the hospital. So you might want to read some of those and understand what has really already happened to people that we want to stop happening in the future. And then, of course, hospitalhostagehelp.com. Between those 3, it will provide you with what you need to make sure that you or your loved one, or even just a friend in the neighborhood, because you really want to spread this. You want to get this out information to others. Share this broadcast, this program that we've put together here with as many people as you possibly can, because that's how we're going to turn this around and get the patients back as the reason for the existence of the hospitals. So Greta, Laura, I can't thank you all guys enough. Keep up the good work, and God bless you, and God bless America, and God bless Texas.